Derek Cook. In relation to Frank Shorter's death, he was convicted of aggravated murder, aggravated robbery, and kidnapping. Shorter, 68, was killed by Cook at an abandoned building on Cincinnati's Side Street. Shorter oversaw Sullivan's clothing store as its manager. Cook allegedly stole money and clothes from Sullivan's, abducted Shorter, led him to an abandoned building, robbed him, then shot him in the head at close range, according to the report. Cook demanded reward money for the murder weapon and called Shorter's wife and the police. Jeremy Cunningham. Cunningham and his half-brother, Cleveland Jackson, killed 3-year-old Jayla Grant and 17-year-old Lanisha Williams in a Lima residence on January 3, 2002. Cunningham and Jackson planned to rob a guy of his money and crack cocaine while Jayla, Lanisha, and 6 other individuals were at his home. Cunningham and Jackson shot everyone in the house after stealing jewelry, cash, and drugs. They shot Lanisha in the back of the head and shot Jayla twice in the head while her father was holding her. Jackson and Cunningham were also found guilty of attempting to kill the survivors, all of whom got hurt by gunshots. Jackson was also given the death penalty. Vaughn Davis. While on parole for the murder of his wife, he shot his ex-girlfriend, Suzette Butler, in 1983 and was found guilty of aggravated murder. After Suzette Butler left an American Legion post in Hamilton, Ohio, Davis shot her several times, including in the head. Archie Dixon. He was found guilty of killing Christopher Hammer, 22, on September 22, 1993, in Toledo, Ohio. Joel Drain. He was found guilty of killing inmate Christopher M. Richardson. Drain was already serving a sentence of 30 years to life in prison for aggravated murder, felonious assault, and theft in Hancock County. Stephen Sepek. For the murder of Frank Munz during an aggravated robbery, Sepek received a death sentence in Ohio. He used the lamp cord to strangle Munz after striking him with a hammer. Davel Chin. Chin received a death sentence after being found guilty of aggravated murder. The fact that he killed Brian Jones during a robbery led to his conviction. Curtis Clinton. In 2013, Clinton was put on trial for the 2012 murders of 23-year-old Heather Jackson and her 2 children, Wayne Jr., 18 months, and Selena, 3 years old. In addition to having already done 13 years in prison for the strangling murder of 18-year-old Misty Keckler in 1997, he also essayed and strangled a 17-year-old girl a week earlier. Clinton received a death sentence after being found guilty on all counts of aggravated murder, essay, and aggravated burglary. Timothy Coleman. He was found guilty of killing Melinda Stevens, a Springfield Police Department confidential informant, in 1996. Coleman admitted his crime to several individuals with whom he was held in jail and prison after his arrest, according to the prosecution. Douglas Coley. He was tried and found guilty of killing Elokdi Samar, a young woman in Toledo, Ohio, while committing an aggravated robbery. When the crimes were committed, Coley was just 20 years old. Terry Froman. He was found guilty of the abduction and killing of his former girlfriend and her son. Kimberly Thomas had recently requested Froman to leave her house in Mayfield, Kentucky, after they had been together for 4 years. He entered the house on September 12, 2014, shot and killed her 17-year-old son, and then took her hostage. On Ohio's Interstate 75, Froman shot her in his vehicle. Clarence Fry Jr. On July 31, 2005, when Tamila Hardison, 41, was watching her 3 grandchildren, Fry stabbed her 4 times. He told 2 of the young children that he was going to slice potatoes as he entered the house with a bowl and a butcher knife. Later, the kids fled to a neighbor and claimed that their grandmother had been slain by Fry. Tamila Hardison and Fry had been in a relationship. Larry Gapon. In the early hours of September 18, 2000, Gapon used the splitting axe to kill his ex-wife Martha Madewell, 37, her companion Nathan Marshall, 40, and Madewell's 13-year-old daughter Jessica Young at their home on Pleasant Hill Drive in Dayton. He struck Madewell and Marshall in the basement. Then, upstairs, he attacked Jessica in her bed, inflicting fatal injuries. Jerome Henderson. Henderson killed Mary Akoff, his neighbor, who was 26 years old. Akoff resisted her assailant and was repeatedly stabbed and battered before her 10-year-old daughter discovered her naked body when she got home. When Henderson broke into Mary's apartment, he tried to assay her, stabbed and beat her repeatedly in the head, chest, and neck, and cut her throat at least 13 times. Edward Lang. He was sentenced to death in Ohio for the aggravated murders of Jaron Burdett and Marnell Cheek, along with aggravated robbery and gun specifications. He received a death sentence for the murder of Cheek, life without parole for the murder of Burdett, and a prison sentence for aggravated robbery. Aaron Lawson. After his cousin ended an affair with him, Lawson confessed to killing her and 3 other family members. In October 2017, 1 week after Stacy Holston ended her relationship with Lawson, he broke into her home in the little town of Pedro, shot her 3 times, and then essayed her dead body. Then, posing as Stacy's husband, Lawson called her son's school to ensure that he came home from school rather than visiting his grandparents. Lawson shot the 8-year-old boy when he got home that afternoon. When he didn't hear from his wife, Stacy's husband, Todd Holston, became concerned and called her parents, Tammy and Donald McGuire, to go see how she was doing. Tammy broke into the house with Todd's consent and was shot dead by Lawson. Donald went to see how his wife was doing and was also shot dead. Lawson repeatedly stabbed Todd with a knife when he got home 10 to 20 minutes later. However, Todd managed to pull the weapon from Lawson's hand and threw him out of the house before discovering the bodies and calling 911. Todd brought along his other son, a 2-year-old who had slept through at least the first 3 killings after Lawson had put him to sleep following the murder of his mother. Carl Lindsay. Lindsay was sentenced to death for the 1997 murder of Donald Ray Whitey Hoop in a murder-for-hire plot orchestrated with the victim's wife, Joy Hoop. On the night of the killing, Lindsay accepted a firearm from Joy and later ambushed Whitey outside a bar in Mount Orab, Ohio, shooting him multiple times, including a fatal shot to the head. Witnesses saw Lindsay at the scene, and forensic evidence linked him directly to the crime, including blood-stained clothing and the murder weapon. The jury found him guilty of aggravated murder with death specifications, and he was sentenced to death due to the calculated and contract-based nature of the killing. Gregory Lott. He was convicted of murdering 82-year-old John McGrath during a robbery in his East Cleveland home on July 12, 1986. He tied up John, doused him with heating lamp oil, and set him on fire. Police discovered John on July 15, 1986, when they went to his home to check on him. John had been badly injured but was still alive. He did die on July 23, 1986. Jose Loza. Jose Trinidad Loza Ventura was sentenced to death after being convicted of the January 16, 1991 murders of 4 members of his girlfriend's family in Middletown, Ohio. He gunned down Georgia Davis, Gary Mullins, Cheryl Centeno, and Jerry Luana Jackson, who was 6 months pregnant, as they slept, shooting each victim in the head at close range. Clarence Mack. He was sentenced to death after being convicted of the January 21, 1991 aggravated murder of Cleveland businessman Peter Sanelli during a carjacking. Mack and accomplices confronted Sanelli as he left his glass and mirror business, forcibly taking his vehicle and fatally shooting him 3 times at close range. Witness testimony, including an accomplice's confession, plus forensic evidence such as spent shell casings and ballistics linking Mack's gun to the crime, established his guilt. The jury unanimously recommended the death penalty, which the trial court imposed and was later affirmed on appeal by the Ohio Supreme Court. Joseph McAlpin. He was sentenced to death for the brutal April 2017 murders of Michael Kuznick and Trina Tomola Kuznick during a planned robbery at their Mr. Carr's dealership in Cleveland. McAlpin disguised himself, entered the business armed, and shot both victims and their dog execution style in the head. Surveillance video and DNA evidence and testimony from a co-defendant tied McAlpin directly to the crime. Despite representing himself at trial, the jury convicted him of aggravated murder and accompanying capital specifications, and swiftly recommended the death penalty, which the judge upheld. The Supreme Court of Ohio later unanimously affirmed his death sentence. Calvin McKelton. He was sentenced to death for the calculated 2009 killing of Jermaine Mick Evans, whom he executed to prevent him from testifying about the 2008 strangulation of his girlfriend, defense attorney Margaret Allen. Evidence included his admission to informants, witness testimony, and the jury finding that Evans was murdered to obstruct justice. The jury unanimously recommended death, which a judge imposed and the Ohio Supreme Court later upheld. David Myers. He was sentenced to death following his conviction in February 1996 for the aggravated murder of 18-year-old Amanda Maher. In the early morning of August 4, 1988, she was found near railroad tracks in Xenia, Ohio, with a spike driven through her temple and strangulation marks. Myers was the last person seen with her and was later found in possession of her belongings. A jury found him guilty of aggravated murder, and the court imposed the death penalty based on the premeditated and violent nature of the crime. Amanda was also a mother to an 8-month-old baby. Calvin Nayland. He is on Ohio's death row for the August 8, 2007 slaying of Liberty Transportation in Perrysburg Township, Ohio. After being informed he was being fired, Nayland ambushed and fatally shot branch manager Douglas Smith execution-style in the head, and safety director Thomas Lazar shot multiple times in the back on company premises. Investigators recovered shell casings at the scene, and his getaway vehicle led police to arrest him days later in Michigan. Matthew Nicholson. He was sentenced to death for the September 2018 murders of his girlfriend's teenage children, 19-year-old Giselle Lopez and her 17-year-old brother, in Garfield Heights, Ohio. After a violent argument at home, Nicholson went to his car, retrieved a gun, and returned to shoot both teens multiple times in the back as they stood in the driveway. Surveillance evidence and his own admission during a standoff with police contradicted his claims of a blackout or self-defense. The jury found him guilty of 2 counts of aggravated murder with death penalty specifications for prior calculation and design, following which they unanimously recommended the death sentence. The Ohio Supreme Court affirmed the convictions and death sentence in February 2024. Tyrone Knowling. He is on Ohio's death row for the 1990 double homicide of Bernhard and Cora Harting in Atwater, Ohio. The couple, both 81 years old, were found shot to death in their home, and the crime was initially unsolved. Knowling, then 18, was later convicted based on the testimony of 3 associates who claimed he participated in the murders. These individuals received plea deals or immunity in exchange for their cooperation. However, Knowling maintains his innocence, and several key issues have cast doubt on the conviction. Notably, the murder weapon was never found, and Knowling volunteered for and passed a polygraph test. Ballistics tests revealed that a .25 caliber pistol he had stolen during a robbery was not the murder weapon. Additionally, fingerprints found at the crime scene did not match Knowling or his alleged co-conspirators. Some of the witnesses who testified against him have since recanted, claiming they were coerced by law enforcement. Despite these developments, Knowling's requests for DNA testing on evidence from the crime scene have been denied, and his appeals for a new trial have been unsuccessful. Denny Obermiller. On August 10, 2010, Obermiller, then 23, killed his 60-year-old grandfather and 61-year-old grandmother in their home. The victims were found strangled to death, and the crime scene was staged to destroy evidence. Gas burners were left on and candles were burning. Obermiller was arrested days later in Licking County, Ohio, and reportedly confessed to the killings without being read his Miranda rights. In 2011, Obermiller pleaded guilty to 17 violent crimes, including aggravated murder, essay, and kidnapping. A 3-judge panel in Cuyahoga County unanimously sentenced him to death for the aggravated murders and imposed concurrent prison terms for the other offenses. James O'Neill. He is on Ohio's death row for the 1993 murder of his wife, Carol O'Neill, in Hamilton County. According to court documents, after Carol expelled James and his sons from her home, James admitted to officers that he broke into the house, followed her upstairs to the bedroom, and shot her to teach her a lesson. He was convicted of aggravated murder and aggravated burglary, and for attempting to murder Carol's son Ricardo, who was present during the incident. Gregory Ossie. He is on death row for the February 14, 2009 murder of David Williams, a business partner in a contracting company. He fatally stabbed Williams in Williams's home, and the crime was committed to prevent Williams from reporting missing money allegedly stolen by Ossie's girlfriend from the business. Kerry Perez. He is on Ohio's death row for the March 2003 aggravated murder of Ronald Johnson, the owner of a bar in Springfield, Ohio. Perez entered the bar with an accomplice intending to rob it. During said robbery, he shot Johnson once in the back, killing him. Perez was convicted of aggravated murder and sentenced to death. The Ohio Supreme Court upheld the conviction and sentence in December 2009, affirming the use of jailhouse recordings of Perez's conversations with his wife as evidence in the trial. Mark Pickens. He is on Ohio's death row for the 2009 aggravated murders of his ex-girlfriend Noelle Washington, her 9-month-old son, and the 3-year-old child she was babysitting. The crimes occurred in Cincinnati, Ohio, and were committed after Washington reported to police that Pickens had essayed her. The following night, Pickens entered her apartment and fatally shot all 3 victims. He was convicted in 2010 and sentenced to death by a jury. Wayne Powell. On November 11, 2006, Powell set fire to a home, resulting in the deaths of Mary McCollum, her 4-year-old adopted son Jamal McCollum Myers, her 52-year-old mother Rosemary McCollum, and 2-year-old Santa Thomas, a cousin visiting for the night. The fire was intentionally set using gasoline poured through a crack in the door. Walter Raglan. Raglan is on Ohio's death row for the 1995 murder and robbery of Michael Banney in Cincinnati. Raglan was convicted of aggravated murder and aggravated robbery, with the jury recommending a death sentence. The Ohio Supreme Court upheld his conviction and sentence in 1998. Raglan's legal team has raised several issues on appeal, including claims of ineffective assistance of trial counsel. Notably, Raglan's attorneys conceded his guilt during voir dire and opening statements, but later argued for acquittal during closure arguments, which has been a central point in his appeals. Michael Scott. Michael Dean Scott is on Ohio's death row for the 2001 murders of Dallas Green and Ryan Stouffer in Stark County. Scott was convicted of aggravated murder, aggravated robbery, kidnapping, and firearm specifications. The Ohio Supreme Court upheld his conviction and death sentence in 2004. The case involved Scott's implication in 2 separate killings. Dallas Green was shot after a brief exchange of words, and Ryan Stouffer was killed during a vehicle theft. Scott's confession and ballistic evidence linked him to both crimes. During the penalty phase, the defense presented evidence of Scott's traumatic childhood, including physical abuse and neglect, which contributed to his psychological issues. Despite this, the jury recommended the death penalty, and the judge imposed the sentence. James Weir. Also known as Namir Abdul Mateen, he is on death row for his involvement in the 1993 Lucasville prison riot at the Southern Ohio Correctional Facility in Lucasville. During the 11-day uprising, Weir participated in the killings of correctional officer Robert Vallandigham and inmate David Summers. The riot resulted in the deaths of a total of 9 individuals, including 7 inmates and 2 correctional officers. The incident was one of the most violent prison uprisings in U.S. history. Clifford Williams. He is on Ohio's death row for the 1990 murder of taxi driver Wayman Hamilton in Ohio. At the time of the crime, Williams was 18 years old. On the night of August 3, 1990, he hailed a taxi, shot Hamilton in the forehead, and stole his money. Hamilton was airlifted to a hospital but was later pronounced dead. A .25 caliber bullet was recovered from Hamilton's head, and Williams was arrested shortly after the incident. Martin Rojas. He is on death row for the 1992 murder of Rebecca Becky Scott in Hamilton County. On May 14, 1987, Rojas forcibly entered Scott's apartment, stabbed her in the back, and essayed her. Before leaving, he set the apartment on fire by spreading paint-stripping gel and opening a gas valve, causing an explosion. He also stole $25 from Scott's purse. Marvin Johnson. He brutally killed his then-girlfriend's 13-year-old son, Daniel Bailey, by beating him to death, gagging and binding him, and hiding his body in the basement. Afterwards, he kidnapped and essayed the boy's mother, Tina Bailey, at knife point, forced her to withdraw $1,000 at a bank, and then fled. Johnson was convicted on 2 counts of aggravated murder, one for the premeditated killing of Daniel and another under felony murder provisions, along with kidnapping, essay, and aggravated robbery. The prosecution presented powerful evidence, including blood spatter matching Daniel's DNA and testimony detailing the kidnapping and assault. Please hit that subscribe button if you like my channel. See you next time. Bye bye.